interference did not impact the outcome of the last two general elections. Nor have I seen any evidence to suggest that there are currently so-called traitors in Parliament. While I saw evidence of some concerning behavior, the evidence does not show any MPs plotting with foreign states against Canada's interests.
That's Justice Marie-Josée Hogue releasing her final report as Commissioner of the National Inquiry on Foreign Interference. In that clip there, responding to a report released last year from what's called the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, or NSICOP for short. That report stated the committee had seen troubling intelligence that some parliamentarians are, in the words of the intelligence services, quote, semi-witting or winning participants in the efforts of foreign states to interfere in Canadian politics. Justice Hogue also making 51 recommendations to better protect this country against foreign interference, 24 of which she says could be implemented before the next election. Joining me now to talk about this a little bit more is Public Safety Minister David McGuinty. Hi, Minister. Good to have you here in studio. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Vassy.
I wanted to start off on the NSICOP report versus what we heard from Justice Hogue, and particularly because you chaired that committee, and your name was on that report that came out. That report concluded that there was intelligence suggesting that there were basically parliamentarians, former or sitting, who had wittingly engaged in foreign interference. She concludes the opposite, that there is no witting engagement. There are no traitors in Parliament. Who's right?
Well, the first thing I want to say to Madam Justice Hogue is this is an incredible piece of work. This is a really, really good report. A great diagnosis of the challenge of foreign interference and a great series of recommendations for improvement. Look, there's not that much different between the report done by NSICOP. In fact, NSICOP did 3 foreign interference reviews, not 1, and on 2 separate occasions made similar comments. But what she's revealed is she said she's had much more access to more difficult obtained intelligence. So she had more time, more lawyers. Her mandate was different than the work that the review committee at NSICOP does. And another difference is this. At NSICOP, you have 11 parliamentarians. So they're quite steeped in the practice and the art of politics. This was a legal approach to the challenge. And I think taken together, they complement each other. And I think right now it's time for us to move forward to implement much of the change.
And I have questions about how that change will be implemented, but I guess I am confused on how they might complement each other. And just when you made that comment about there being kind of politics involved, are you intimating that part of the conclusion reached by NSICOP was political in nature?
No, I think that there's just simply an experience that comes to bear when you're a group of parliamentarians deliberating about different fact scenarios and intelligence that's given to you. She's had the benefit of perhaps additional information, as she says in her own review, information that was not brought to our attention at the time. But I don't think there's much daylight here at all between the 2 reviews. I think if you look at the bulk of the text, 90% of it is very similar, and the recommendations tend to be very overlapping.
I would argue that the daylight is that there are people who read your report and your committee's report and concluded there were traitors sitting in Parliament, and that prospect existed for such a long time that there were MPs calling on the government to release names, to name names, versus hers, which is conclusive that there are not traitors in Parliament. I don't get how that's complementary.
The word traitor never appeared in any NSICOP review.
But she debunks the idea even that there are semi-witting or witting people. She says if they are involved in that, based on further evidence that she was able to review and the underlying evidence that you based your conclusions on, that she did not arrive at that conclusion.
Yeah. I don't know if she went that far. I think she went as far as saying that there was behavior which was questionable. I think in that sense she's reaffirming a lot of the findings of the NSICOP review, but there is no indication at all. There never was an indication of the word treasonous or treason or traitors never appeared in any works. I think these were remarks made by an intemperate politician at an intemperate and maybe an inappropriate moment.
Here's what the report said. Unfortunately, the committee has also seen troubling intelligence that some parliamentarians are, in the words of intelligence services, semi-witting or witting participants in the efforts of foreign states to interfere in our politics. That doesn't say traitor, but it says a whole lot that she didn't.
Well, she said there was evidence of very concerning behavior. I don't see a lot of difference between what we're saying, what we said at the time, what she's saying now. And again, she's had the benefit of a different kind of process, maybe a dozen lawyers, hundreds of witnesses, much more time, more resources. But I think you would find if you went back to the NSICOP members of the committee and asked them how they felt, I think they feel that they made a major contribution. Here's the good news.
But did you jump the gun? To be fair, do you think you put too much? Do you think that part of the report essentially, like, do you still stand by it? Or should it have been maybe more cautious?
No, absolutely. And in fact, the same language was used in the 2019 Foreign Interference Review, verbatim. Several years later, it was lifted and brought forward. So nobody raised that in 2019, 2020, 2021, or 22, 2023. So we have a situation now where I think we have a go-forward strategy and good recommendations for improvement. That's what I really am focusing on.
Let's talk about that then, because the Justice says 24 of 51 can be implemented before the next election. Do you agree?
I'm not sure which 24 she's referring to, having just received the report a few hours ago. It's 850 pages. My officials are poring over it now. Many of the recommendations are directed at public safety and the agencies that we represent. We're going to be looking at that very carefully, see what we can get done. But, you know, so much has happened already, even during her time at the Commission. We're making huge progress in wrestling with this really important issue, which is not just a Canadian issue. It's a global issue.
It is certainly. Her recommendations are fairly specific to the Canadian context insofar as what can be done before the next election. I think the reason that, of course, we're asking you and your cabinet colleagues is because that election could literally be 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 weeks away, or a couple months at least, which doesn't give you a lot of time. There are some that also require Parliament to be in session. For example, changes to the Canada Elections Act. Is that something that should be considered for your government? AKA, should you be considering bringing Parliament back rather than proroguing it to ensure that the most integrity possible applies to the next federal election?
Foreign interference, just like the border, isn't a partisan issue. I really believe that parliamentarians of good faith and goodwill, if we can come back to Parliament in mid-March or late March and address some of these pressing issues, we should do so. I also think that we may have to do something similar. We'll see when it comes to the question of adjusting to possible tariffs. We'll have to see how that rolls out. But it's always possible. And I really do believe now is the time. I really believe that Madam Justice Hogue has hit the right note in terms of dealing with political parties, Elections Canada, financing, disinformation, misinformation. But so much of this is already being handled. Remember, she's also conclusive. 2019, 2021, both elections were free and fair. Canadians have to understand that too. But I think right now there are ways for us to move forward to fine-tune and improve the situation and to build on the things that our government's already done.
But when you say there's time to do it and the ability to do it when Parliament reconvenes in March, or even in the example of responding to the tariffs, I mean, this recommendation is being made now. It's not even February. Those tariffs could be coming February 1st. Why are you willing, and your party, your government, willing to, keep Parliament from being in session when they may have to respond to this stuff? And isn't that more in your interest rather than the Canadians?
The first thing to remind Canadians of is how dysfunctional Parliament was last fall. For 5 months, it was consumed with a point of privilege, which was, I think, at a certain point, becoming obviously spurious. That was unfortunate because I think many parliamentarians from all parties, including the official opposition, wanted to move forward. On March 26th, we're going to restart. And it doesn't mean that Parliament's over forever. It means that we're going to be able to look at whether we're going back for a period of time, weeks, months. Remember, we have a fixed-term election date on October 20th, 2025. Now, if we can get together, and again, people of good faith and goodwill may very well look at this and say, this is worth doing now in advance of the next election. I think it's possible.
I guess, though, I have to challenge you on this idea that March 26th provides enough time. I mean, you could have an extra 6 or 7 or 8 weeks to A, come up with a response that adequately addresses the economic impact of those tariffs, or B, make sure that though she does conclude, as you point out, that the last 2 elections, there's no reason to doubt the outcome, have even more integrity. And instead, in order to stave off an election, the Parliament is prorogued. I know you're saying that this is because of the, kind of situation that Parliament was engulfed in prior to Christmas, but the opposition would contend that is, as much about them as it is about you.
Yeah. Look, we came together very quickly on Bill C-70, the Countering Foreign Interference Act. We did it together in all-party consent and rapid speed. I'm sure we could do something similar. In fact, we'll have to wait and see how this tariff relationship continues. I'm focused on the border. It may mean that we need some more border measures, some more legislative measures, some more funding measures. Right now, we've got everything we need for the $1.3 billion plan that we've put in place. But
are you willing to come back earlier if you need that stuff?
That's a question I'm going to leave to the leadership of the party right now. I'm certainly willing to work whatever I've got to get done in order to make sure that these tariffs, A, are not applied, and B, that we satisfy the American administration on the border front.
I want to ask you about that. I know your time is limited. I just think Canadians are very interested on what is going to happen and the prospect of these tariffs. Do you think this is about the border?
I think this is about a bigger plan that President Trump promised to pursue during his campaign. I believe that many Americans feel that America is struggling. I think they feel that they are put upon. And I think we have to be, frankly, empathetic. The United States of America is a phenomenal partner of Canada's. On the border alone, there are 400,000 people that go back and forth every day, billions of dollars of trade. It's the longest undefended border in the world for a reason, because we've always managed to manage that relationship well over 150 years. So right now, I think what President Trump is trying to do with his administration is to deliver on the promises he's made. He's raising probative questions about the border. We're answering those. We've made serious improvements in the last month, 2 months. And I'm hoping that'll satisfy them.
You're heading to Washington this week. Do
That's
you
the plan.
think that this country can still escape the imposition of those tariffs?
I think it's always important to remain hopeful. And I think that my overtures, my discussions, my exchanges with American officials has demonstrated one thing to me, which is that Americans as well as Canadians understand how important this relationship is. Economically, geopolitically, even on a security and intelligence front, on a day where we're looking at foreign interference, this is a big problem in the United States. We share a lot of information. We pursue these challenges together. So I'm going to continue to remain hopeful, do everything I can to remind our American counterparts that it's always better to win-win rather than lose-lose.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Safe travels and thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.